Hi guys, welcome back to Coding World. Today in this video, we are going to see one more interesting tutorial, which is a Spring Batch tutorial. In Spring Batch, we are going to explain what is a Spring Batch and a simple Spring Batch microservice which processes the file from a particular location and put into the database. So this is a Springboot Spring Batch architecture where we have a job repository, then job launcher is there, and all jobs are registered to the job repository, and each job has a steps. Okay, so in steps we have a three parameter, which is a item reader, item processor, item writer, and a job can contain a multiple steps. So one first step is completed, second step will be taken, and for each steps there have item reader, item processor, item writer. So this is our simple demo project which is going to be like this. So here we have a Spring Boot microservice which has a Spring Batch as a dependency, and we are going to create a one job in that microservice. That one job has a reader, processor, and writer. In reader, what we are going to do, we are taking a file from file system, like which is our directory from resource, and then we are going to process that and applying our business logics. After processing, writer will write that file records into database. So this is a simple project which we are going to see using a Spring Batch. One of our subscriber, our channel subscriber told that please create videos on a Spring Batch. So I am starting first video on a Spring Batch with this simple demo project. Then we will going to create a multiple Spring Batch videos on different topic and different scenarios. So let's get started for implementing this. So let's start with our first step, which is creating a Spring Boot microservice using a Spring initializer. So in Spring initializer, I am using a Java, Maven, and Snapshot 2.6.7, and I am giving a group ID as a coding world and artifact as a Spring Batch. Spring Batch. You can keep a packaging as a jar, and in my case, I am using a Java 11. Then you have to add some important dependencies, which is a Spring Batch. Then you have to add web, which is because we are exposing APIs. Then we have to add Postgres. Then we have to add, which is a database, and JP. So when you have added these four dependencies, generate the project and import into IntelliJ. So this is a test1.txt. This is a file which will be coming into our file system, and we are going to process this file and putting into the database, which has share code, company name, quantity, amount, and type. So share code is 203 TCS, quantity 120, amount 432, and type is 1. 1 is for sale and 0 is for buy. And I have copied this application.property files. Like I am using a Postgres database, so I have imported Postgres dialect, and this is my Postgres database. This is a username, password. One thing I have mentioned here that we are making batch job enable as a false, because if it is true, by default it is true. So whenever your application start, those batch get started. So we don't want to that, because we are going to trigger the job by our REST API, and initialize schema is always. So whenever we start our application, the database tables related to the Spring Batch will created into your database. Now let's start by creating a simple bean for this data. We are mapping this data into that bean. So I'm creating a package, and in that package I'm creating a bean. Okay, we are done with our bean creation. So create a setter getter. And we have to annotate this with a annotation table and entity. So automatically this table will get created into our database. Done. Now we create a repository for this share transaction. For that, we are going to create a package, and in that package, we are going to create a repository. So in this, share transaction is my object and integer is my ID. Now this will create a CRUD repository which will give us all data by ID, and it will provide the delete update functionality. So we are done with our share transaction repository. Now we are going to create reader, processor, and writer. For that, I am going to create a batch, and in that batch, I am going to create reader, processor, and writer. So in this configuration, I am going to create a reader. So public, we are going to read a flat file. So flat file reader is there, and which is a share transaction type. Item reader, and in that we are going to create a flat file reader. Now to this flat file reader, we have to set the source. So from where we have to pick the file and read. So now I am giving it a hard code, which is our, let's copy this file. I am copying absolute path from SRC. Okay. Now we have to define line reader. We will set this name as for our, when in future we are going to create a multiple reader. So for that, to identify uniquely, we are going to name flat file reader. Then for flat file, set line mapper. So new get line mapper. I'm going to create a method get line mapper. All these properties are separated by a comma. That's why I'm mentioning as a comma. And set as a strict. I'm setting it as a false because sometimes if our line don't have those many tokens, then it should not fail. It will skip that. Line tokenizer dot set names, and in that we have to give all our headers of our file. So I'm copying this and putting here. Okay, now we are done with, we are telling line mapper that these are the headers. We have to write a bean mapper, bean wrapper, so that all these headers will be mapped to the bean field. And here we have to give a line tokenizer, which is our comma separated. Default line mapper dot set field set mapper, and here field set mapper I'm giving, and in the end we are returning default field mapper. Now we are done with our line mapper. Now we have to tell our flat file reader item that we are going to skip sets. We are going to skip first line because it contains header. And in the end we are returning flat file reader. And I'm making this method as a bean, and we are skipping this bean creation at the start. So we are making it as a step scope, because this will created at the time of step. Like for your job there will be multiple step, and that time this bean will be created. Okay, now we are done with our reader. Now we have to create a processor. Now I am going to create a processor. So we have created an item processor. Now item processor implements interface, which is item processor. Item processor from Spring Batch item. And it will take our share transaction, and it will return a share transaction. We have to implement one method, which is a process, and here what we are going to do, we are checking share transaction, and we are doing summation. Like, so if we have two entries of the TCS with a quantity 120, then it will be a summation and it will be a return sum to the writer. So now we are going to, initially we are going to return as it is. Let's see, without processing anything, and in next step we will process that. Now I am returning as it is. Now I have to write a writer, and for that I am going to create a item writer, and which is going to implement Spring item writer, and in this I am making it as a share transaction. So let's implement this method. Okay, it is returning list of share transaction. So now we have to auto wire share transaction repository and call the method from share repository as a save, and save those all data. Save all, and in that I am passing list. So let's print log system.out. I have not imported a log forger or SLF forger, so I am printing system.out.println list of size, list dot size, persisted. Now I'm going to into our flat file reader, and we have done with our reader, processor and writer. Now next step is to configure our jobs. So let's create a job into batch config. Here what I am going to do, public job spring batch core and get job, which is expecting job builder, item reader. In our case we have share transaction item reader, then processor, item processor. In our case share transaction comma share transaction processor. Now last thing is item writer. In our case it is a share transaction writer and item writer. Now create a job instance. Before that we have to create a step for our job, because each job contains steps. Spring batch step. So for step we have to integrate step job factory. So we will integrate there here step job step builder factory, and using this factory what I am going to do, I am going to get step of share transaction step dot share transaction comma share transaction of 100 chunk size. This we can give as a chunk size 100, and dot before build we have to pass this item reader reader, which is our item reader, then dot writer, in our case item writer, and processor, in our case item processor. Okay, we are done with our step. Now we have to give this step to our job. Return job builder factory dot get job with string share transaction, the same name which we have given. Okay, and now we are done with our job, and this job I am giving as a bean because this is a factory of job. Okay, now job will automatically get created at the configuration level, and all our reader will be get created at the step level. Now we have to create a simple controller, and that controller will trigger this job. So I am going to create a package, and in that package I am going to create a Spring Batch controller. Now in this I am exposing one GET API which we are calling from our Postman or our Chrome. public, we are returning batch status. So batch status, unless and until that batch gets completed, we are not returning the batch status. Once that job completed, we will return the batch status. So for that, we will loop into while unless we get the success status. So read and persist file, and for that I am going to write a job. So for that we have to auto wire a job. Auto wire, this will come from our configuration, and to run the job we have to write a job launcher. So I am auto wiring that also. Job launcher. So if we want to pass some configuration to our job, we are using a map of job parameter. Okay, map dot param dot put. We are putting time, let's say, and new job parameter, and in this we are putting new date dot get time, and we can access this into our job also at our processor level, at our reader level, at our writer level. So now I am going to create a job parameters equal to new job parameters, and in this I am giving map. In our case it is a param. Okay, and our job execution equal to job launcher dot run our job and pass our job parameters. Now we are going to print our system dot println job execution status. Status. We will be looping unless and until we are not getting status as a completed. So job execution is still running. I am printing. Once this is completed, we will return job execution dot get batch. So this is a get result which is returning batch, and I am annotating this with get mapping, which is run persist job. Let's throw all the exception which is coming from our run method. Okay, now we are ready with our controller. We have to call this controller and test our Spring batch job is running or not. So let's start our application and test writer, reader and processor. Now I'm going to start our application. Oh, job builder factory is not configured. So for that we have to add more important annotation is which is a enable batch processing. Now rerun our application. Check all annotation you have used or not. Sometimes like item processor, we have to mark it with a component. Reader, we have to mark with a component. I'm marking it as a component. You can mark with a service or configuration, whatever we want. Now our application has been started. Let's test our backend API, which is our coding world / persistent job. Persist job. So let's copy this and go to our Google Chrome. Let me check 8088. So I am going to hit my first API, localhost coding world / persist job, and job has been completed. I want to show you that when our application gets started, that time in our database some table will be created for our Spring batch, and those are like, so those tables are batch execution context, batch execution param, batch job, batch step execution, batch step context, and this is our shared tran, which is a database we have, so which is a table we have created. And if you see, we are able to see our quantity, items and transaction. Those two records we are able to see here. So you can check that for more than 2 records and billion records, and test the performance of this Spring Batch application. So this was a small demo for the reading file and putting into the database. And next time we will tell that we will create an automatic job which will be reading after 2 hours, 3 hours and picking files from particular folder and putting into the database. So if you are interested for that next lecture, please do like this video, share with your friends, and happy coding. Thank you.